Welcome everyone to the Home Services Summit webinar series. We do these the first Thursday of every month, and I think this is show number 25 as I'm looking back at over the last couple shows we've done. And thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure to have everyone tune in. As you know, feel free to interact in the chat section of the Riverside dial-in, and we'll make sure that we get to any questions you've got. Some housekeeping items, and we'll get right into the business side of things. We're really excited to have Kevin here from Buzz Brands. I had a chance to talk with him backstage about some of his business escapades, which we'll go through, and this is going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to it. My name is Scott Abbott, CEO of 5-Star Franchising, and some housekeeping items. Our Home Services Summit annual event is coming up here on September 20th through the 22nd. It's going to be in person for the first time. The last two were virtual, but in person for the first time this September. We already have over 300 people registered to attend. You need to be there if you are in the home services industry. All the content is built for home service franchising and for franchisors and franchisees. We're doing it at the Caribbean Royale or in Orlando, and you can get more information at homeservicessummit.com. So once again, the format, I'll take the first 45 minutes and asking questions of Kevin and hearing his life story and his wisdom in franchising, which is very broad. And he's the owner of a number of different brands and home services. And then we'll turn it to you guys, ask any questions you'd like, which I'll pull up for you at the very end. So Kevin is the chairman and CEO of Buzz Franchise Brands, a multi-brand franchising company that includes Pool Scouts, which does pool cleaning, Home Clean Heroes, which does residential home cleaning, and the British Swim School, swimming lessons, Grand Illuminations, which does holiday lighting, and he's the former owner of Mosquito Joes, which went to about 350 units before they sold it to Neighborly. What else is interesting is that there's always a connection between home services and owning airlines, and Kevin has done that. Prior to founding Buzz Brands, he co-founded Volaris, a low-cost airline in Mexico, and oversaw a raise of about 160 million in capital, and that would make sense because he's been in the business for a while, and he worked for some time as a consultant with Bain and Company in the Dallas office. Him and his wife are now empty nesters. I just found out that Kevin has a house in Park City that I'm waiting to get invited to, and so we'll have to do some skiing or snowboarding together this next winter. This winter was epic in terms of the amount of powder we saw in Utah. So with all that ado, let's get right into the program. Kevin, love to just give us your backstory, and if you wouldn't mind, I know you did it with me backstage a little bit, but just kind of walk me through for all of us, where you started in business and with, I believe it was Bain and Company, and then on your own, and then your first introduction to franchising. I'd love for you to just tell our audience where that all started.
Sure, happy to. Good to be with you, Scott. It's nice to finally meet you, even if it is virtually. So. Yeah, very, very simple, high level. Started after graduating from an undergrad program at business school. Started my career at Bain and Company as a consultant in the Toronto office. For those that don't know Bain and Company, it's now a global strategic consulting firm that does work for a lot of very large companies. Shortly after joining the Toronto office, they were looking for people to help go start the Dallas office. And as much as I like snow, I prefer to ski. There was a lot of snow on the ground in Toronto in February, and there was none in Dallas. So another guy and I took the trip down to Dallas, and we really never left. That was February of 91, I guess. So spent about 5 years at Bain and Company. Worked in a lot of different industries. One industry in particular, which is sort of a common theme in my background, is the airline industry. So did a lot of work for Continental Airlines during their turnaround days. After probably about 5 years with Bain, I left to start a bagel store, a retail bagel chain with a couple partners. Always was pretty entrepreneurial as a kid, and always wanted to start. I looked at Bain as sort of a continuation of my business education, but I ultimately wanted to run my own business. So we started one, and that's where I got introduced to franchising, cut my teeth with franchising a retail bagel concept. Bagels were new in Texas at the time. Some of those first Texans came in, thought they were biting into a donut and realized it was a little stiffer. But we grew that to about 30 locations throughout Texas, all using the franchising model. So learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes. We were young. I was probably in my late 20s at the time, but really enjoyed it. We sold that business, and I got recruited by a former Bain Capital, Bain and Company partner who had been just named CEO of South African Airways, and he was building out his management team. And so he wanted me to join him in Johannesburg. So I joined him. I oversaw the cargo operations, the maintenance operations, and my wife and I were down there for about 3.5 years. This was right when Mandela was turning over power to Mbeki. South Africa was coming out of apartheid. It was a pretty exciting time. It was a pretty dangerous place at the time. Joburg was sort of a tough neighborhood, but it was fun. I learned a lot. Loved the country. Loved the people. Really enjoyed that. Pretty challenging. When I came back from South Africa, I landed in Virginia Beach, which is where we're based now. My wife is from here. We wanted to raise our children with family around, so that's how I ended up here. And I guess so I stepped into. I got a call from a friend that was starting a private equity fund in Mexico and wanted me to join him. So I joined him down in Mexico. Naturally, I went to the first industry that I understood fairly well. So my experience is pretty narrow, but deep. It's either franchising or it's airlines. And what I saw in Mexico was a country that had 12 airlines. None of them were very good, in my opinion. So why not start another one? And so they didn't have anything like what we might know today as a Frontier Airlines or a Spirit Airlines. And so I wrote the business plan. I got my partner on the private equity fund to agree that it looked like a good opportunity. We then went out and talked to others in the industry. Long story, very short. The company we hired a management team. It raised $100 million. We launched in 2006 with 6 aircraft. If you fast forward to today, Volaris now has about 120 aircraft. The 13 airlines are down to 3, and Volaris is now the largest in the country. And it really is one of the best run airlines in the world. The management team there is outstanding. It's one of the lowest cost airlines in the world. Mexico is one of the largest bus markets in the world. And so you're really getting people out of the buses and fly for the first time. So anyways, overall, great story. Like most of our business journeys, it's never a straight line. So there were a lot of ups and downs, but that would take far too long for the time we've got here. So then after doing that, I was in private equity for a while, both in Mexico and in Virginia. And then in 2012, I saw a business that had and a business, Scott, it had 2 trucks, a couple hundred customers. It was called Mosquito Joe. I love the name, and worked a deal with the founders of that group to buy the business, bring on some new investors, hired a team. We rebranded the company and turned it into a franchise model. And then we went and grew that over time to about 350 locations across the country before then selling it to Neighborly. But then along the way, as we grew that business, we were having some success, and we said, why are we having this level of success? So we began to look at other opportunities in the home services space. And so we really, we put our consultant hats back on, and we said, what are the services that homeowners receive? And we sort of put our criteria together, and we looked at them all. And the one that bubbled up to the top was Pool Scouts. That was a business that was super unprofessional, very fragmented. Put that together. Then along came Home Clean Heroes. Then we purchased a business called British Swim School. And then we most recently, just last year, started Grand Illuminations. So that's the very quick overview.
Yeah. You've been franchising so long. You probably remember when we didn't have to do registrations in each state to sell something. It was the Wild Wild West back in the 90s, wasn't it?
With the and it wasn't called an FDD. It was called a UFOC.
Uniform Franchise Offering Circular, right? We're going back. We're dating ourselves here. UFOC. Yeah. That's just, there's and I know if you go back far enough, franchising really didn't have a great reputation because people would go into trade shows and, right, they'd be having guys sitting there just selling whatever they could, taking the $5,000 check and, not delivering really much of anything. And people just sales guys making commissions versus now it's been controlled, I think, which has helped improve the reputation of the industry, I think, in the end. I think back to my business school, and one of the things I was taught by one of our professors was the quickest way to become a millionaire was to invest $100 million into an airline.
Yeah.
Just,
I've heard a similar quote, and I think it was Branson's quote: "How do you become a millionaire? You start with $1 billion and open an airline."
there
Um,
you go. Exactly.
yeah, so it's not for the faint of heart, and as I said, there's a lot of ups and downs, but um, it's a there's a few ways to make money in that business. One is to be a low cost provider all the time, and that's one way. Another way is in turnarounds. It's tough though. I mean, it's a hard business to operate. It's a hard business to make money in, even best of times. And you're subjected to, on the labor side, mostly unions, and then on the uncontrollable side, largely oil and fuel, and that's
Yeah,
that's tough to manage. So, but these guys have done it. I mean, they've just every year they've continued to grow, and we're now in South America, Central America, all over the U.S., and it's a real success story with a great management team and a great board as well. So.
I'd love to get your view on, having run so many different kinds of businesses and comparing that experience in airlines or in retail bagel shop to now home services, which obviously have done very well in. How would you compare and contrast? Would you say that is running an airline a lot harder than running a franchisor?
Yeah, a lot harder. Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not even a comparison. I mean, it's just if you think about all the things that go into just getting a flight in the air, it's tough. I mean, I think they on average have about 60 employees per aircraft, per every aircraft in their fleet. And then you think of the catering, the fuel, the wet. I mean, there's so many things that come into
Lots
it.
of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts. So franchising is relatively easy. But then within franchising, every franchise has its issues as well.
Of course.
But I
Let,
love
let's spend some time. Let's spend some time on Mosquito Joes. Obviously, you built the brand, started in 2012. Did you sell it in 2019? No,
2018. Yeah.
2018. My memory's not the best, but so you owned it for 6 years. Saw incredible growth, going from 0 to 350 is very impressive, obviously. And there's been a few mosquito concepts I've seen, like Mosquito Squad, Mosquito Authority, that have done well. Mosquito Shield, obviously the
Yep.
brand that we own,
Yep.
have all seen kind of similar trajectories in general. There's a lot of enthusiasm around controlling, diseases from entering people's yards through a mosquito. But I'd love to get your view on having started a business from that point to, did you build it knowing you were going to sell it in 6, 7, 8 years? Is that always part of the plan? Kind of talk us through how you thought through that.
Yeah. So when we raised money to launch the business, we raised money. We don't have any institutional money. It was all individual money, high net worth money, people from my background and business career. And, whenever you raise money, there's this obligation to give them a return and ultimately give them some form of liquidity event. And so, the timeline we had put on ourselves was 5 years, but a lot changed over the 5-year period. We got into other businesses, but that commitment of wanting to get money back to them was important to me and something that I wanted to honor. And so what we did is we looked at all the options. We could sell the whole business. We could bring on debt, or we could just carve Mosquito Joe, and I call it Mojo. We could carve Mojo off at the time and sell that. And by that time, I was no longer running Mojo. We had a dedicated team running it, and it just seemed to make the most logical sense. I mean, and candidly, it was a bittersweet decision. I mean, the sweetness of it obviously is pretty straightforward. It was a really good return that we earned for our investors. It was an event. The bitter part was we were very close with all those franchisees. That was our baby, and we're very close with the team. And so I think we managed the transition well as can be expected. The current guy that runs it is a guy named Lou Shager, super dude, and really is doing a great job. I mean, that business, since we sold it, system-wide revenues probably close to tripled under his guidance and under Neighborly's ownership. So doing really, really well. So I just look at it as a win-win for everybody at that point, both for Neighborly, for us, but it was not an easy decision. What helped that decision making it was the markets appeared to be a little frothier. They were paying some nice multiples. It turns out that wasn't the high water mark. I mean, that happened a couple of years later, and probably still happening right now. I mean, the markets are pretty frothy, continue to be.
Yep, there's no question. I'd love for you to, give us maybe some of the benefit of those 6 years of starting Mosquito Joe, sorry, and until now, what would you say are some of the key learnings or big takeaways you had from starting that business and taking it to the point of an exit like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot, and there were I would say the first one was probably the team we put together to support the franchisees. I think we had a very, very strong team. That core team that was with me then, they're still with me today, really at the Buzz Franchise Brands level. So that was really important. I think selecting some good franchisees, supporting the heck out of them was important. The unit economics, as you know, in that business is, it's not a difficult business, which was also nice. It's a fairly forgiving business as far as businesses go. It doesn't have a huge technical component to it. People know that you're not going to kill every mosquito when you go out there. So if one shows up on their arm one time, they're not going to be upset with you, as opposed to, cleaning pools or cleaning homes. They've got a specific way that they want that pool to look. So,
Yeah.
so I think with Mosquito Joe, I mean, I think, we picked some good franchisees. We saw who the leaders were in the franchise community, and we got their support early on. We really emphasized growth above all else, especially in the first 2 or 3 years, especially with a seasonal
Yeah.
business. They shouldn't expect to make money in the first season.
Yeah.
So we really had them focus on the top line, getting and retaining customers and growing that revenue. And eventually they'll grow into the profitability. For that business, it was really important to do that. I think the other thing we learned was early on when we set the business up, we asked ourselves, what's the biggest problem a new business owner faces, or a new franchisee for that matter? And it always was the same thing, which is how do you effectively deploy a marketing budget to recruit customers and build a nationwide brand in the course of doing that? And so we really made marketing a hallmark of what it is that we do. And so, a Buzz brand, I think, is really synonymous with, super marketing support. We have a shared services platform we use. We have almost the way to think of it's like an in-house agencies, but we really help take a lot of responsibility for helping recruit customers for our franchisees. And we do that now with all our brands, but we really learned that and honed that with Mosquito Joe. So that was really important to us.
Yeah, that's probably worth spending some time on. I think two things I'd like to pick away at from what you just shared with us is, one, on the franchise development side, adding, 55, 60 new territories a year on average over 6 years is super impressive, right? And it's difficult to replicate. I think the model helps for sure,
Yeah.
but, I'd love to dig into that a little bit with you. And then you mentioned some things around, the shared services model and supporting the franchisees around the lead gen and marketing. Let's kind of look at both of those. So first, on the fran dev front,
Yep.
how did you find your franchisees? Do you guys use brokers? Was it mainly off of advertising and social media marketing, or how'd you find your candidates?
Yeah. So we did not enter the broker community until sort of 2 years into it. And, one of the piece of advice that was given to me by one of my board members, Kurt Landwehr, is you probably know Kurt, really knowledgeable guy, really, one of the best fran dev guys in the country. His assessment was don't enter the broker networks until you're ready, until you've got everything finally honed, because people will go in too early, and as a result, they're not prepared. They fall flat on the face. They don't have a good development process in place. So we waited a couple years before entering, and so all those leads were organically driven. We had a lot of success with Entrepreneur Magazine. We had a lot of success with the magazines on the airlines. That was a big thing for us when we found out, but it was all organic. I think if we had our my CMO on the call with us, what she would say is there's no silver bullet. There was never any one thing. We did a lot of different things, and that's sort of consistent with the way we help with the marketing with our franchisees. So we then entered the consultant community, and then really continued to work on our engagement with the consultants. So much of that is relationship driven. They're total pros, and they want to make sure that when they give a candidate to you, that you're going to treat them, very well and walk them through a good process. They may not end up being a candidate, but it's really important to them. So I feel we got great traction in the community, and that really accelerated the growth. And to your point, opening that many territories, we there were times where we felt like our hair was on fire. I mean, there were long days, long hours. trying to hire in advance. One of the things I didn't mention early on, one of the things that I thought we did well is we made sure we were well capitalized. And so when I started the business, I've done a bootstrap startup before with the bagel concept. It wasn't that fun. You can do it and you do it once and you learn a lot. But really, I wanted to make sure that we had enough money so that we could hire great people, pay them well. If I wanted to do things on behalf of the franchisees, I could do that and not feel like I'm going to, be running out of money. So that was the other thing that worked well for us.
Yeah, I think there's lots of good advice there. I'd like to just pick a couple of those points again, or just highlight them more than anything. And that is, for emerging franchisors and home services, often, and I actually hear from people who ask for advice from me on this topic. When do you enter the broker network? And one of the worst things you could do to a concept is pile on a whole bunch of fuel when the flame isn't quite lit properly yet and it's not burning properly yet. Like you're going to put it out. You need to have enough franchisees that can validate and also just improve your concept works in more than one or two markets. You need to have several markets that are working. Your model works in all those markets. You need to give a good handle on the P&L and how to support those franchisees effectively before you throw on 30 new franchisees. So I think that's, Kevin brought up that advice, which I think is really valuable. The other thing he mentioned, I think that's worth noting is, which I actually haven't heard for a while, but is, doing advertisements and hitting your audience on planes. I mean, you're thinking about it, right? You need to find people that have some disposable income and have some capital and have a higher net worth that can afford to buy a business. And I think Mosquito Joes is very likely attracting the kind of people that are still keeping their jobs, I would imagine, in many cases, until their business grows big enough, because it is part-time, it's seasonal, right? Yeah. So you found a way to get in front of that audience very, very effectively, which I think is also super interesting. So both those I think are worth noting. Let's jump into your shared services model. And you mentioned, before I do that, capital. Kevin mentioned this, and that is being well funded from the beginning. Myself as well, I've started something from scratch, bootstrap, 5-star painting from the ground up, right? Franchising does definitely take the place of having to raise a lot of money, because you are front loading a lot of revenue through franchise sales. And if you're really good at organic, you can bring quite a bit of money in to help fund the business until your royalties exceed your costs, right? So there's no question that franchising is capital efficient in general, but being well capitalized and thinking in terms of how to support franchisees. I mean, Kevin said it, right? Being willing to spend money beyond what you're collecting to support franchisees is really, really important. You ultimately have to be delivering an amazing service to the franchisee so they can validate. And if you do all those things, I think you can. Those are kind of the pieces of the recipe, the ingredients of the recipe of a successful franchise system in the home services industry.
Yeah, so it's interesting to note, Art, just so you to give some context for your listeners. I mean, our franchise development budget in the first year was $400,000.
Okay,
so that's a pretty significant amount of money. We couldn't have done that if we didn't have raised the money in advance to do that. And I think the following year it was $350,000. So we really went to market pretty hard with the opportunity. I think I lost you, Scott. You there? Oh, there you are.
I don't know what happened, but I'm back. I'm sure Kevin took care of everybody. That was
I started answering questions.
Yeah. I think you were saying, though, as I was jumping off, that you had a lot of money put aside for franchise development, right? And that's important. Did you answer some of the questions that were on the side there for us?
No, I have not. I was only kidding, but okay. It really went to, my overall philosophy on raising the capital is it generally reduces the risk of the franchisor. You can hire good people. You can support the franchisees. It makes franchisees coming in comfortable that they can see you've got cash on the balance sheet. It just overall takes the temperature down a bit and reduces the risk.
Absolutely. Great points. I'm going to try and make sure that I stay on for this. Is the first time I've actually dropped off one of these interviews, so I apologize, Kevin. You're the first to experience it. Sure. But if it happens again, just keep answering questions. You'll do great. I'm sure. I'm just kind of keeping banter going while people learn from you. So You mentioned that how you manage the platform is a shared services model, and that you have a team of people that support the franchisees in producing leads. Tell us more about what that looks like. I'm presuming a lot of your leads are coming from digital marketing, if you're home services.
Yeah, a lot are coming from that. A lot are coming from direct mail. So we have what the shared services platform. When we moved from owning one brand to owning a second brand, we sort of put our hats on. We said, how do we get leverage from doing this? How do we get leverage for the franchisee and franchisor? And because the business models were so similar, even though the end service provided was different, we felt there was a lot of overlap and things that we could do. So the first part of the shared services program is our marketing, and our CMO oversees that. And the best way to think about that is an in-house agency. So we do blogging, we do content development, all forms of digital. Direct mail is a large component for each of our brands. We do the full logistics of buying the list, printing the document, getting them out on behalf of the franchisee. We do videography, so full on support structure, no incremental cost to the franchisee in terms of the services part of it. The next,
So you actually that internal agency is it paid through the ad fund
no,
effectively?
no, I
Is
mean
it
maybe
just it's paid from the royalties?
a small portion of it, but it comes out of the royalties that we get. Yep.
Okay.
So it's heavily subsidized by ourselves, but works well. I mean, we charge a little bit of it to the ad fund, but not much. Most of the ad fund gets content that's delivered into their
So the franchisees pay the hard costs on direct mail or
we
the
do.
pay per click or
Yeah.
those kinds of campaigns, but you're saying that your internal marketing team provides a service of managing all of that without charging the franchisees, other than some small amount to the ad fund.
A small admin fee, 15% or so, but it's very small. I should say each brand team also has marketing on it as well. So this shared services sort of cuts across all brands, but every brand team has a president, head of operations, head of technical, and a head of marketing with a support team below them. The next part of the shared services program is our sort of analytics platform that falls under our CFO, and we utilize a BI, business intelligence visualization tool called Tableau. And so any information that can be captured, any data that can be captured on behalf of our franchisee, we do that. It all comes in every night, and we've got the dashboards available, and they get a viewer's license, so they're able to pull it up. As opposed to going on to every single cloud platform that we have, they can go to one in a consolidated way and be able to see what it is that how well they're doing. You had asked at one point earlier about how well they're doing against their peers, how well they're doing against the goals they've established, all the key dashboards. And for some reason they're falling short. If they think their gross margin should be 55% and it's only 40%, and the answer is, okay, well, why? We can go on and really peel the onion back with them and very quickly diagnose what the issue is, course correct it, so you don't lose much time. So anyways, that's the analytics platform. And then we have an onboarding and training platform, which again cuts across all brands. But the idea there is to expedite how quickly we can get people, from when they sign the franchise agreement to when they get open. How do we quickly get them up to speed and onboarded, trained up, and ready to get started?
Awesome. Let's unpack that a little bit, because I think there's a question here from Jeff actually on this point. So each of your franchise brands has their own CRM, I'm presuming, or that they are using to run their business day to day.
Yep.
The data from those brands are speaking to a data warehouse of some kind, and Tableau sits on top of that and grabs this data and allows you to look at all the brands and slice and dice it to get to different KPIs and numbers, right?
Yep. That's a great summary. Yep. It's AWS as our central database, and I like to think of it as a bicycle with a hub, and that's AWS, and the spokes go out to all the cloud. Every day it comes in. Tableau, just like you said, lays over top, and we sort of pick out what it is we want to share.
Yeah, that's great. And that's actually, for everyone who's interested, that's how we do it at 5-Star Franchising. 6 brands, all CRM speak to data warehouse. Data warehouse grabs the data, and we then make sense of it for our quarterly and monthly reports. And
Right.
You have to run the business by the numbers, just like we tell the franchisees to run the business by the numbers, right?
Yeah.
So you got to practice what you preach there. And then In terms of your franchise relationship management, you mentioned you have a system that helps track them from the day they buy all the way to they open and on. Who are you using currently to manage all of your friend? And is it the same system across all the brands?
Yeah, so we have so we use Fran Connect, which is
Yeah.
our lead gen. That's where we house a lot of the compliance issues and other things. So we use that. We also have a learning management system that once they get onboarded, they got a series of webinar steps to go through, getting your licenses, all the things that are required by brand. So, but Fran Connect is the core one that we use both with franchisees and within the franchisor.
Got it. Got it. I got a couple of questions coming up on the chat, but before I get to them, Michael, when I got logged off, your question disappeared. So either Will, if you're on, if you could repost Michael's or the other chats earlier, so I can make sure I get those questions answered. Paul asked a question here around best funding sources for franchisees. Selling 350, I'm assuming you've got partners you deal with, really work with really closely to help these franchisees get funding. Do you have certain partners that work really well for you? 401k roller partners or SBA partners that you work with closely?
Yeah, we've got the Fran Fund is a good partner of ours that we work with. They do a great job for us. Benetrans is another one that we do a lot of work with. One of the benefits of having low investment models like we do, a lot of our franchisees already, it's not a lot of money they have to come up with. So a lot of them will use their own personal HELOCs or something to get it started. We do some 401k Robs. And again, those would be done through a Fran Fund or a Benetrans. But
okay,
that's never been a constraint for us. Financing for a franchisee has never really been a constraint. There's lots of good sources out there.
Yeah, we've been fortunate. And the only time that I've ever seen funding be a problem was in 2010, 2009 were really difficult moments. Unemployment rates were skyrocketing. Everyone wanted to buy a franchise, but we could not unlock credit from almost anywhere. Since then, things have been pretty fluid, and hopefully they stay that way. I know there's some bank issues that are popping up with interest rates coming up, but hopefully that we can continue to see that come through. Let's jump into what I'm going to call the front of the funnel, and you probably are closer to this than most franchisors. The franchisees ultimately are getting their leads from somewhere. You mentioned that you do some print, you do some digital marketing and so forth. You have a shared services model that supports all those franchisees. Are you seeing any movement or changes or concerns around the front of the funnel for the brands that you currently own? Like calls coming in, number of calls coming in, number of leads coming in. Any concerns there?
No, it's interesting. We're having so high level across all of our business. We're having a record year, both in terms of franchise development, but also in terms of same store sales as well. So, I think our same store sales are, on the low end, maybe, 20%, on the high end, 46%, but overall growth is like 33 to 59%. So it's really not, we're not seeing, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. We're just not seeing the type of slowdown. And I think it might be, if you look at our brands, in the case of British Swim School, people still figure out how to spend money on their kids, and early survival skill lessons for swimming is just critical. That business, we're probably, the largest in the country by the number of pools that we're in. So there's a lot that are out there. And there's a lot that didn't get a chance to learn to swim during COVID. So, but there's relatively small expenses compared to some of the, the larger CapEx items that maybe people, like I'm thinking like, $2,000, $3,000 jobs maybe for flooring business or for, garage installments. I think they're hurting a little bit. Some of the bigger ticket items are hurting, but we're not seeing it.
One of the things that I can, for those of you that are maybe that are close to the digital marketing piece, I keep getting data points back. In fact, my brand president of ProNexis was at an event with Scorpion this week in Austin, Texas, and I got some messages back from him on this. And I was sitting down with one of the founders of College Hunks Hauling Junk, Omar, and he was shared this, and I've got 6 brands with 6 brand presidents, and ProNexis supplies about 45 brands in the customer experience space. In fact, I think Coffee and Heroes is one of our clients.
Yep.
So we help brands deal with the lead flow that's coming in and turn those into leads. And so we were always looking at leading indicators and what the market's doing. And I think what you're saying is on point, Kevin. And that is that for some brands, lower ticket price brands, they tend to be a little more resilient. But almost across the board, what I've heard over and over again is the cost of acquisition of customers through digital is going up. The cost of making the phone ring from pay per click. Google is doing more and more to dial in people to have to spend money to get, they don't like free lunches or free rides, right? All the SEO in the world you could do, but ultimately they're going to keep modifying things and make you spend money to do through pay per click or through any of their other programs or Instagram or social. And so I don't know the exact number. I think Ben was telling me that people are seeing about a 20 to 50% increase in costs of acquisition of leads. I don't know, Kevin, have you seen that at all?
Yeah. Yes, we're seeing that a little bit in our businesses. Another business that we're involved in, we made a passive investment in a company called Medi Weight Loss, which is a chain of franchise retail locations for weight loss. That business has gone crazy in terms of the cost per click to get somebody to see. SEO has worked out well, and then we're getting a bit of a tailwind with some of the new weight loss drugs that are causing people to go to websites. But your overarching message is something very consistent with what we're seeing. The cost per leads are going up.
Good. So I'm not crazy, and if you're seeing it as well, you're all not crazy as well. It's not just you. I think there is, and I think this will be a trend that will continue. And so sharpening that saw, like getting really good at being efficient in that category, or finding other ways. Like Kevin mentioned, direct mail is a part of what he does to support his franchisees. If some of you aren't using direct mail, you may want to consider doing that. I want to ask another question around, what's changed over the years. 2012, you got into Mosquito Joes. Today, you have a number of brands. What would you say has changed in terms of how you support your franchisees from 10 years ago to today? Have you seen much change in what you need to do as a franchisor?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've gotten, we just try to continue to get a little bit better each year. We really try to sustain our high touch support model when it comes to franchisees. So that includes really some of the best practices around onboarding, structured site visits, regular scheduled calls, system video calls. We are doing a lot more. As much as we love getting out to the sites, we are doing more remote, both our content management, learning management system. We're getting good content put out there for them on a regular basis. So I would say, more, just more of the same, but just getting better at it, getting better at doing it. We make fewer and fewer mistakes. We've got good retention of our team. We just had an offsite the other day, and we had about 20 people that have been with us 5 years plus. And so if you're able to retain good talent like that, it's great. We're up to about 65 people. We've sort of doubled in size in the last couple of years, but the core part of that team, that real foundation we have is still with us. And that's really great. There's just lots of learnings that go on with that.
It's a nice segue to, the other question I had for you. When you're managing multiple brands, could you kind of walk us through your accountability chart? And in speaking about that, how do you organize leading the brands? I know you've mentioned some stuff is centralized, right?
Yeah.
But maybe talk us through, do you have brand presidents? And if you do, are they only dealing with operations, or do they do other things as well? Like, do they manage friend dev, or is that centralized? And I guess another question would be, in supporting franchisees, kind of what do you think about in terms of number of field consultants or I'm not sure what you call them, or trainers?
Yep.
Or coaches do you have to a number of franchisees? Maybe just walk us through that.
Yeah, sure. So if I have 3 direct reports. I got a CFO. He's got probably 3 or 4 people that work for him that manage all of our accounting functions. I've got a COO and president, a guy named Brian Garrison, super capable guy. He has the brand presidents that report to him.
Okay.
So then within every brand then is set up autonomously with a brand president, head of operations. If there's a technical component, so like say British Swim School is an example, we've got an aquatics lead, an aquatics team, and we have a marketing support. And then they have franchise business coaches is what we call them. And roughly it's around 20 or so franchisees per business coach. And it depends on the mix of experienced franchisees versus new franchisees. New franchisees require just a little bit more support in the first few years. And then what we try to do is we try to hire in advance. So as we put our plan together with how many franchisees we're going to recruit, we've got a every month we know when to post the ads, when we're going to hire the people to bring them on, get them onboarded for a couple months, trained, and then launch with their own franchisees. Fran Dev, it reports to our COO. We've got about 4 Fran Dev people. I think we'll come close to, we'll do somewhere between 80 and 100 new franchisees this year with that team.
Wow.
Looking to hire another couple of people in that area. We're seeing some really good take up with the opportunities. And then I have our chief marketing officer, and she oversees all of the shared services component for marketing. And then probably the best way to think about it, Scott, she's got a dotted line into each director of marketing for each of the brands as well, even though they report directly to the brand president, just to keep sharing of best practices, keeping consistency across the brand. She's got her hands in that. So that's really how we're set up. We do, we do a lot of plan. I'm very analytic by background. Most of my senior team is, so we're constantly looking at, are we hitting our plan? Are we behind? Why are we behind? Sort of peeling the onion all the way down. We have annual performance reviews with our team. What we do is we create what we call a document. It's a single page document for every brand. We call it our strategy for winning. It's got 4 pillars. It's got a financial pillar to it. It's got a people pillar. It's got a franchisee pillar, and then it's got a customer pillar to it. And, we look at the key metrics that we want and then the key initiatives that we're launching for each one. So, I worked for a guy at Bain & Company. He was one of my mentors, and his belief was that every single company should be able to distill their strategy, their initiatives, their metrics on one page that everybody can look at. Yep. And we share that. We share that with our full team. Like I said, we just had an offsite. We do that annually with our team where we get them up to speed with how the year's gone so far and where we still have to go over the course of the year, and then what it means for next year. So it seems to work really well. We continue to innovate every year with it, but it seems to be a good, performance planning, accountability system that works for us.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. I think that's a lot to learn from that for sure. I think there's what I like what you've done there is you've really kind of looked at all the stakeholders as you think about the strategy and as it relates to the franchisees and the customers.
Yeah. And
I think that's one of the complicated things about franchising is like you ask yourself, who is my customer? And your franchisee is your customer, but so is your customer of the franchisee.
Right. And
you have to think about both, but yet you're not in control of every element of execution at the franchisee level, right? But still, how does a brand ultimately deliver superior services to the end user is got to be paramount and top of mind in everything you're doing.
Yeah, and there's really, if there was only one thing that you could do as a franchisor to track how well the customers are, what their experience has been, it's the Net Promoter Score. A concept developed by a partner at Bain & Company where I used to work, and Fred Reichelt, and he sort of coined this term that, you can gauge the engagement level by a single score. And we've seen, that's a high score from our experience will drive 2 things. It will drive high retention of customers, and it'll drive high referral rates from existing customers. And if you have a low score, the opposite happens. You're going to lose customers and you're not going to get the referrals. But we track that religiously on every single brand for every single franchisee. And if we start seeing it dipping down on any of them, we're all over it. It's a leading indicator for sure.
I think that there's probably a correlation between low scores and satisfaction of franchisees too, right? Ultimately, if you got franchisees who've got happy customers, then they're going to be happy with their business. And if they've got a lot of complaining customers, and I'll put a plug out there for a technology that we use called Opinion that we use across all of the 5-star franchising brands that sits between all of the customers and they are reviewing effectively. And it does distill to a net promoter score as well. And so we track, how many reviews I'm getting daily, weekly, monthly across all brands for all the customers. And we're also trying to make sure we're getting in front of upset customers before they go online and tell people. Absolutely. Right. And so there's a number of tools out there. We chose Opinion. They've been a good partner for us. And it's been, there's no question that if you're a home service franchisor, more than ever before, if you're trying to master your SEO and your rankings online, one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that people are talking about you online and doing reviews of you online. That all feeds into ultimately the machine of referrals and so forth. So Good plug there for that. I'd love to get your views as a CEO and the owner of the business. When you think about how to add value to a franchisor in the home services industry, what would you say are the top three things someone needs to focus on?
Um, you never go wrong by listening to your franchisees and finding out what's most important to them. You should already know what it is, but sometimes those will change. So we listen to the franchisees a lot. We do that through different ways. I mean, annually we do it through an FBR survey that works really well for us. But we do it through calls. We do it through the advisory councils that we have for each of our brands for the franchisees. Um, Ultimately, I mean, what's beautiful about franchising is in many ways, it's like the simplest thing in the world, because all you have to do is make sure your franchisees are successful and everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah.
And so focusing on that, if you don't know, the people talk about the unit economics, critical. You've got to make that right. And then, what does that mean? Maybe how do you get revenue up for them? How do you get costs down? How do you get the overall investment down? You can begin to peel it. But if you just start with the core foundation, the core question, how do I make them successful? Everything else will work. It'll get you to the right answers.
I think that's it. We don't think we know it, right? I mean, I think I've been involved with over 1,000 franchise contracts at this point in my career,
Yeah.
and having lived this long enough, there's just simply that's it. Like, and it's that way in every business. Taking care of your customer, making sure they're happy. Franchising is a little more complicated, obviously, but you putting them first is really critical. Um, with on that note, Michael asked this question, and I'll bring up in the chat. For anyone else that has any questions, feel free to load those into the chat now, and I'll make sure I get to those here with Kevin. Um, how do you think about the core values of your organization, the core purpose of your organization, mission, vision, or values of the organization? How do you think of that in terms of Buzz Brands? How does that relate to the other franchisees that you have? Do all the franchisees all see the same mission and vision, or do you have it segmented by
Yeah.
brand?
Yeah. We've got a vision, we have a mission, which is enable people to realize their dreams. Our vision is to be a leading multi-brand franchisor. Our mission, enable people to realize their dreams. And then we have a set of 5 core values: lead with integrity, be curious and innovate, empower and serve, act with purpose, and have fun. The first time when candidates come to our office for Meet the Team Day, or we call it Meet the Team Day, some people call it Discovery Day, the first meeting is with me and my leadership team. And really the first or second slide that they see when we sit down and talk to them about the opportunity is we walk them through that vision, mission, and value statement. And we talk to them about what's important to us as an organization. And then we give them very concrete examples. And so, lead with integrity. We had some very, very detailed examples from the pandemic. We had one brand that was British Swim School that was shut down completely for several months. The entire business was shut down, and we made the decision to we set a goal for ourselves. We're not going to lose a single franchisee during this, and so we stopped taking any royalties, any minimums. We stopped taking any technology fees. We loaned money to franchisees if they needed to shore up their personal balance sheet. We did a lot of different things to really align ourselves with the experience that they were in. And I think that really paid dividends for us. At one point, we were at $1 million in loans to our franchisees. And I was fine doing that. I would have doubled that because, we knew this wasn't going to last long, but it was also consistent with our core values. The other thing we did is when we started working remote, we went to all of our employees and we said, nobody's going to lose their job. We've got enough cash on our balance sheet to weather any storm that's thrown our way. What I want you to do every morning when you wake up is focus on our franchisees, help them get through this. And we're going to come out the other end of this stronger. And, I was on a podcast early in the pandemic and I said, this is the approach that we're going to take. It was different than a lot of companies were going to do, but it was right for us and it was consistent with our core values. So they are very important to us. They're guideposts for us for making decisions. We live, we breathe them. We recognize our employees when they're living our core values. I just think it makes you a better organization.
You know what, Kevin? I love that you shared that because I've found that I've had a lot of people on this show. This is like I said, my 25th time I've had someone like yourself on this show. And I've found over and over and over again, the people who have found a lot of success have followed the recipe you just discussed, and it's not just talking points.
No.
Like, they live by it. I would dare to say that what you described as your values is something you would take home to your kids.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
it's something that it's about who you are. You can't separate who you are as a leader and entrepreneur from your business.
yeah.
And it's pervasive. And when it is that authentic, it is something that just becomes so natural. Like, that's of course what we would do, because that's how I've always lived. So you're seeing that.
It's really important. I mean, I think when, like, look, every system will have franchisees that don't make it, right? And you can beat yourself up about why they don't make it, but it's seldom because there's a bad territory or there's a competitive situation. It's almost always that there was something going, and it's not the support that you provide, but you should look at that. But the key thing is not that you're going to have failed franchisees. I think it's more important how you deal with those franchisees. And guess what? It's been a bad experience for them. It's probably been a bad experience for you. There's no need to sort of pile on. How do we work through a graceful exit for you so that, you're not happy? We want to get you into a situation where you are happier. And that's probably not with us, but let's work on this together and get through that. We've never had a single piece of litigation in our entire career. There's nothing in that. And it's because we listen and we work closely. And I think we're empathetic with our franchisees because, look, nobody likes to fail, but you learn a lot when you fail. But more importantly is how you deal with that and how you deal with the people you're with.
We can never forget that at one point in the relationship, they trusted us with their 401k or their HELOC or their nest egg. At one point, they bet it all on a business that we own. We can never forget that. In the 1,000+ agreements I've been a part of, never been litigated with a franchisee.
Yeah.
There are ways to help people out of the business, and it should be respectful. And the best way is to find someone else that wants to get in, right? To help them sell their territory and maximize what they can out of it. That's the best way. In some cases, there's life events that occur that lead to, unfortunately, them leaving the system earlier than they could sell it. But I love that approach, Kevin. I think that's great point you've made. I like to come back to something you said earlier, and maybe just for everyone, we didn't talk about this. How many franchisees do you currently have amongst all the brands total within the Buzz Brands network? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think it's around 230. It's a moving target, obviously, about 230, 240.
Yeah, so that's a lot of people that you're supporting and that are making their livelihoods off of your business. What do you say? You mentioned, I think 80. Was it 80 was your goal this year, or was it last year you sold 80?
Yeah, 80 was our goal this year, somewhere 80 to 100. Yep.
And so would you mind just letting us know, of the 80 some units you're going to sell this year, how many of those are coming from brokers versus some of these other methods you use?
Yeah. So right now, back in the day with Mosquito Joe, we set a sort of a 50-50 target of coming from organic. And I think that's healthy, and I think it's important to do. We want to have that target. We don't have that target right now. We're probably sitting at 75% of our new candidates are coming from the consultant community and 25% from organic. Recently, in the last month, I've started to see that tear back a little bit. We're getting some more organic, but I'm comfortable with that. The consulting community provides us some great candidates, and so it works. But just from our business, we'd like to try to make that a little bit more balanced.
Which would you say are if you were to, maybe it's hard for you to do this, but the top 3 broker networks you partner with, which would those be?
Yep, FranChoice would be number 1. And then we've got a bunch but 3 I would say. FranNet, IFPG, and TES are all in that sort of running sort of second, third in those categories.
Yeah. I think it's pretty reflective of what I've seen in general in terms of where deals are happening in general in home services.
Yeah, and it's a I don't know if you're experiencing this or not, Scott, but it's a small handful within each of those networks that drive it, and part of it is their experience working with us, and so you get one across the line with them, and they want to give you more, and but we've been pleased. Really happy with our experience with all those networks.
You hear the 80-20 rule a lot in a lot of businesses. I used to work in an accounting firm for a very short stint that I didn't enjoy very much, and it was quite common that 80% of the customers were 20% of your customers provided 80% of your revenue.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that keeps flowing through, but it keeps doing it over and over and over and over again. And I'd say that's probably pretty similar to the broker networks. There's roughly 20% of the brokers within a network represent 80% of the deals, consistently. And if you can find those, and probably more importantly, 5% of the brokers within those do like 50% of all the deals, right?
Absolutely.
And so that is definitely something to consider and think about as you're entering that as an option for yourselves. Um, we just have gone through the FDD season, right?
Yeah.
We've all done it.
One time.
Hopefully, all your stuff came in on time on April 30th on Sunday night at 12 o'clock Eastern, right? Hopefully, you got it all through on time, so it was all renewals versus a new filing. Did you make any big changes this year in your FDD over last year?
Not really. I mean, I think the one thing that we look like most franchisors, we look at our costs and, things like our direct mail, the paper, or the postage has gone up. And so we'll take some minor adjustments on those categories, where we end up spending, and we learn, and we sit down as a team, and is there anything we want to change? And we're pretty much happy with the way our model is set up and what's in the FDD. Where we spend a lot of time thinking through is on the item 19, or the financial representation, and we update that. And our view always has been, that's the opportunity to really tell your story. And I think a lot of people, first of all, I'm always surprised at franchisors that don't put a financial representation in, or an item 19. I think it's just a really big lost opportunity. But we really sort of take the approach of, what are the questions that we hear the most from candidates? What's our franchise development team hear the most? And how can we put that information into the item 19 to almost answer those questions in advance of them becoming questions? And so our whole view is the item 19 is this opportunity to tell a story. And that's what we try to do. And we just have to spend some time updating the numbers and seeing if there's anything else new that people want to learn about.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, item 19s are probably the most important element. It's, in my view, that FDD, if it's done right, it's a sales document. It's not really a contract or a disclosure document. It's more about how do you let people know exactly what your business is all about. I'm curious, in your item 19s, do you kind of keep the same format across all the brand FDDs? Like you know what everyone wants, and so you always give them leads, close rates, average cost of acquisition, margins. Like, is that kind of the theme you take?
Yeah, there's a core, I guess, framework that we use. And so we have a Q&A type of approach where the question is, what's the average ticket for a Home Clean Heroes? Well, the average ticket last year was this. Or what's the average revenue per truck? Well, the average revenue was this. And then we'll have all the supporting data down below it. So that approach is consistent across the brands. And then we have brands all at different stages of development. So British Swim School is our largest, then Pool Scouts is our second largest. And then we have a couple of emerging brands with Home Clean Heroes, and then Grand Illuminations is our newest one. And so there's only so much data that we have, new data. So then we just have to pair back with what we've got. But we try to keep the same approach, same format. And then each business has its own nuances as well. So lessons business versus, how many lanes of water do you need to teach how many people?
yeah, exactly. It is kind of funny that you actually are cleaning the pools that you are giving lessons in.
Well, I wish that was the case. Most of the pools we clean are outdoor pools. Most of the pools we teach in are indoor pools.
Okay.
They got to be a little. So there is some overlap some places, but we haven't really quite figured out how to really get that. We go into fitness centers and other places where they handle some of that stuff themselves. But it's a great.
I'm aware of that. It's a unique model, really. That you actually are renting out facilities to give lessons versus building your own, which I think is brilliant, frankly.
Yeah, it works for us. I mean, there's different models that are out there. We like the low cost model that's consistent across all of our brands, and we think it just reduces risk. And it doesn't mean that in the future, as you build a brand up in a certain community, it doesn't mean you can't have your own pool, as an example, and convert a pool or build a pool. But with some of our competitors, $2 to $3 million investments, and ours is like $125,000. I mean, they're really fishing in different ponds, if you will, or different pools. So it's not for us.
Well, Kevin, this has been just a pleasure, and I really appreciate giving us the time today and being so open and sharing with all of our listeners what you've learned through your building your businesses. And so thank you for participating, and thank you for our listeners for dialing in and having some questions for us. We'll, of course, post this to YouTube afterwards so everyone can watch it afterwards. And thank you all for participating. Good to see you all.
I really enjoyed spending time with you. Let's get out and do some skiing soon.
Oh, yes, please. I'd love to come up and visit you in Park City. Hey everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this video and more importantly, that it brings some value in building your home services business. If you'd like to access more of this amazing content, like and subscribe below. If you'd like to be part of our live recordings and get involved with the speakers and myself, click the subscribe to calendar button or the link in the description to get updates to future events.